with the ground scorched like a desert, and people dying by the hundreds of thousands, the men in his Sison's village turned to these idols for help. At first, they had a festival in the idol's honor. And then they fed the idols a lot of good food in a desperate attempt to put them into a better mood. The villagers arranged plays so that the idols would be able to enjoy themselves. But still, the rain did not come. Finally, the people took their idols out of the temple and sat them in the blistering sun until the paint peeled, so that the idols might know what it felt like for the villagers. The vain hope was that in self-defense the idols might make it rain. How futile, how tragic. It was like Elijah's contest with the prophets of Baal in the Old Testament. There was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. The only value of that miserable episode in China was to convince Hsi Shengmo that there must be a greater power than those foolish idols. It prepared his heart for the coming of the good news of Jesus Christ. It's really sad. In the midst of these people's troubles, as so many of them were dying because there was no rain, because of the famine, they trusted in painted pieces of wood to save them. It reminds you of a story that Isaiah tells. Isaiah chapter 44 of his prophecy in the Old Testament talks about how the idol makers work. And he said that the idol makers will get a piece of wood, and they'll take part of that piece of wood and they will carve it into a magnificent idol. And they will say, "This is my God." And then they'll take the rest of the wood that's left over and they'll use that wood to make a fire. And Isaiah's making fun of these idol makers. He says, "Look, guys, you took this one piece of wood, you used part of it, and you said that was your God, and then you took the rest of it and you burned it in the fire. If part of the wood is not able to save you, if part of the wood is not able to save itself from the fire, it cannot save you. And certainly that part that you carved into an idol can't save you either." But this is the same sort of situation that you see in this story about Sison. These villagers thought that these idols would save them, but these idols were not even able to save themselves from the sun, from the furious heat, and from the famine. And the paint started to peel off of these idols. And that was the point where Sison made an important discovery. He knew that the idols couldn't save him. And so when he heard about the gospel of Jesus Christ, he responded immediately. He knew the idols couldn't help, but that Jesus Christ could. A lot of times when we hear stories about idolatry going on in these faraway places like China, it doesn't really hit us. But one of the things that we need to understand is that idolatry is something that affects every single nation, every single culture, every people throughout all of human history. We are all idol makers. And so today, as we're talking about the second commandment, we're going to talk about a couple of different things. First, we're going to try to answer the question, what is an idol? And then we're going to take that and try to apply it to different situations that we face in life. So what is an idol? "You shall not make for yourself a carved image of any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them." And the first thing that pops into your mind is the classic idol. The idol that is carved out of a piece of wood, perhaps it's overlaid with gold, as some sort of three-dimensional figure. But when you start to study this commandment in relation to everything else about idolatry in the Bible, then you begin to understand that idolatry is even broader than that. An idol is anything in creation that functions in the place of the one true God. Let me say that again because it's essential that you get what I just said. An idol is anything in creation that functions in the place of the one true God. There are certain things that only the one true God can give you. And if you try to get these things somewhere else, then you are worshiping an idol. Idolatry is something that we see throughout the entire world. And like I said, it's common to think of this three-dimensional image of an idol. An idol can also be something that is painted onto a piece of paper. It can be a two-dimensional picture as well. And so you can often see idols like Buddha or Shiva or Rajiv. These are different idols that you can see in different parts of the world. And when the idol maker is thinking about the idol, and when the idol worshiper is thinking about the idol, then they will say that this piece of wood is not the God itself. But then they'll be quick to say that the piece of wood is so closely connected to the God or to the Spirit that it represents, that it is almost like that piece of wood is the God itself. And so if you go and you talk with someone who is worshiping an idol, and you say, "Where is your God?" then they'll say, "It's right here." And they'll point towards the idol. I've seen this happen before. I've asked this question. And they'll say it's right there in this idol. So one of the ways that the idol worshiper will think about the idol is they will say that this piece of wood is something that contains the God or the Spirit that it represents. And if they don't say that, then this is the other answer that you can expect to hear. They will also sometimes say that the idol is like a window from this world into the other world that allows contact with the Spirit that it represents. And so as they bow down before the idol, they are making contact with the Spirit of God that's there in the other world. And so that the idol is like a window that allows them to do that. And so as they're doing these things, they are using the idol, they're worshiping the idol for very, very important purposes. These idols help them to answer some of the common needs that they have in life. And I want to talk with you about a couple of these common needs and how the idols are related to these needs. One of the needs that I have, that you have, that everybody in the world has is the need for safety. And idolatry often answers this need in people's lives. A man named Paul Hebert once said, "In everyday life, people face diseases, physical ailments, loneliness, business failures, money problems, anxieties in gambling, losses in real estate investments, a husband's adultery, divorce, wayward children, exams, decisions to move the grave of an ancestor, and other calamities, seen and unforeseen, which threaten to destroy their efforts. How can they assure themselves of prosperity and safeguard themselves against such misfortune?" When I was reading off that list, there are undoubtedly several things in that list that you can relate to, things that you have seen in your own life, things that you say, things that remind you of times in your life where you said, "I have no idea what I'm going to do in this situation. How am I going to react to this? How do I react to this tragedy?" We all know that tragedy is something that can strike at any time. I'm standing up here and I'm looking out at a lot of happy faces, a lot of people that are saying that life is good. But we all know that it is possible for us to go home this afternoon and have some sort of a problem that we don't know how to solve, some sort of a tragedy that strikes instantaneously. So how are you going to deal with this tragedy? How are you going to prevent tragedy? Well, the answer for a lot of people who worship idols is going to go along something like this. Think about the opening illustration that I used about the seesaw. They had a tragedy that was going on. They had a famine in the land. They had this problem that they didn't know how to deal with. And the first thing that they did was to turn towards the idols in order to explain that tragedy and in order to